Okay, welcome to How to Live and Lead in Transformational Times, a brief conversation today around my favorite topic. I'm interested to know if it's one of yours, which is change. So we have no shortage of change in our world and in our work today. We are facing all kinds of change. And I would love to know, this is the first instance we can use of the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is completely overwhelmed and 10 is totally on top of it. How are you feeling about change right now in your work, in your world? Let's just get an average, see what's going on for people. How are you feeling in this particular moment? July 20th, no, July 30th, 2025. Where are you at? Completely overwhelmed, totally on top of things. Okay, I think we're averaging somewhere around 4 on that scale, which seems like folks are doing pretty well, all things considered. This is a bonkers amount of change that we as individuals are dealing with, that our organizations and industries are dealing with. It really is an incredible time to be alive and to be a leader. So you're not alone, A. And B, let's just be real about something. It's not going well in terms of change. It's just not going great. In terms of organizational change, one recent statistic is that 78% of organizational change initiatives actually fail to meet their stated objectives, which is wild. Before that, it was thought that the number was somewhere around 67 or so percent, 2/3 of change initiatives fail. But in 2021, a study found that it's actually closer to 78%. And a couple of years later, in 2022, they found that employee support for organizational change has dropped off a cliff. From 74% of employees were roughly supportive of organizational changes in 2016. Today, that number is 43% or lower. I don't think we've seen this rebound in the years since 2022. So 3 years later, I'd be willing to bet we're between change fatigue and just the overwhelm that you all have already validated today. We are really struggling right now to move through this time of change. And I have kind of a central question I'd like to pose to everybody here today. This is also the central question of the book that I am writing, that is about, are we leading change truly in this world, or are we merely trying to manage it? I think that we have, for years, for generations, we've been taught about change management. We haven't really been taught about how to lead change. And so in this hour, you're going to learn a bit, I think, about why this distinction matters to you. And I'm going to offer you 3 very simple steps toward truly transformational leadership, which is what's needed if we want to be part of the 22% of change initiatives that actually achieve success. This webinar, full disclosure, is also a preview of 2 things. One is the book that I mentioned that I'm writing, Radiant Change, 10 Truths for Living and Leading in Transformational Times. So yay, that's coming in 2026. And it's also a preview of a course that I teach, the next cohort of which is launching in September. It's called ARC, the Change Leadership Lab. So I'll share more about that at the end of our session today if you are interested. So you're going to get a taste of both of those pieces today. If you don't know me, hi, I'm so glad you're here. My name is Kristen Lasanti. I train leaders who transform cultures. I've worked with change my entire career at every scale. So I've led campaigns to shift behaviors around social issues ranging from mental health, stigma, to voter engagement, to early childhood development. I have led culture integrations of major corporations following a merger and acquisition. And I've coached global executives to shift their leadership from transactional to transformational. And I love this work, as I think you'll see. I love this work. And I feel so grateful, so personally grateful to be doing it in this moment when we are so inundated with change and we need more of it. We really do. So let's talk about change. And we're going to start with how we think change works or how we think it's supposed to work. Our expectation might go something like this. Somebody identifies the need for a change. So they write a plan, they explain the plan to other people, they execute the plan, and boom, a short while later, success. The desired change is achieved, the plan worked perfectly, and everybody did as they were told, and they feel great about it, right? So, question for you folks gathered here live with us on this webinar. Have you ever seen change work this way? Just give me a little thumbs up or a hand raise if you're like, yeah, this is pretty much how it goes in my world. I would love to know your secret. In my experience and in the experience of the teams that I work with, it looks very different. In fact, this linear thinking about change is very much I love Clara's laughing, crying emoji. Like, yes, this is a myth, right? But this expectation is really a problem for us. This linear thinking about change, which is how we conceive of change, it's how we plan for change, is in this linear way. But the fact is, change really never goes according to plan. And today we're going to talk about some of the reasons why that is. The expectation that it's going to work this way, or the belief that it should work this way, causes us a lot of suffering. When change doesn't go according to plan, we might think there's something wrong with the change. Maybe it's just not possible. Maybe we think there's something wrong with the plan, right? Maybe we think there's something wrong with us, right? Maybe we're not the right leader in the right moment to make this happen. None of that's true, right? The fact is that change doesn't work this way. So we become much more capable, much more powerful in terms of leading change when we start to think about change differently. So change really works a little bit more like this. Now, this is still a massive oversimplification, let's be clear, right? Any kind of line drawing its way through change is not going to work. But I use this modified change curve to illustrate what I call the 10 truths of radiant change. We're going to be walking through some of those today. So whether we're creating the change and leading it, or we're reacting to it, this is kind of the journey. It's not a straight line. This is the path we all take, and we do travel it at different rates. But this is, generally speaking, the path that we can use to think about the journey that we and our teams and our organizations go on as it relates to change. You'll also see that these 10 truths are framed or kind of contained by 3 principles down here at the bottom. First is we can change. Change is both inevitable, it's going to happen anyway, and the kind of change we want to see is possible if we understand how to move change through the systems that we are working in. That word system is going to become very important. Second, our second principle is that we are human. And our humanity is both what's hard about change, it's about what makes us resistant to change, but it's also about what makes change possible. A great thing when it comes to human beings, we are eminently adaptable, right? But our humanity also certainly presents challenges that we need to be skillful in working through. And then third, the third principle of radiant change is that we must play. We can mitigate these challenges by approaching this work of change with a sense of play. Anytime we get overly serious about change, anytime we get doom and gloom about change, we are really cutting ourselves off at the knees, right? A sense of play, of curiosity, of leaning into what's possible with an experimental, iterative, co-creative mindset is absolutely going to get us there. So today, we only have time to really focus in on this first principle: we can change. So that's where we're going to zero in. At the end of the session, I'm going to give you a QR code. You can download a worksheet that takes you through all the rest of the 10 truths. I'll give you a preview of that at the end of our hour too. And the course that I mentioned before, of course, goes into depth on all of this and applying these truths to a change that you're leading in your work or in the world. So we start with we can change. It is quite normal to assume that things will stay the way that they are, particularly if we've witnessed multiple failed attempts at change, right? Which explains some of that change fatigue we were seeing earlier in the statistical drop over the past few years. But the beginning of this work really is about trusting that we can change and that we can be the ones to change things. So truth number one, change is inevitable. Change is inevitable. You know this, right? You hear it all the time. Change is our only constant, right? It's like intellectually we know this. And yet it always seems to surprise us somehow, doesn't it? It always sneaks up on us and we're like, whoa, what's going on? So it's in our nature to change. We human beings are changing creatures, but it's also in our nature to cling to things the way that they are. So when change inevitably arrives, right, we often will receive it as some kind of catastrophe. So I always ask leaders when they are embarking on a change journey to ask themselves this question. It's a mindset question. And I want to ask all of you, again, pop into the chat and let us know. Right now, does it feel like change is happening to you? Or does it feel like change is happening through you? So to me or through me, that's what you're typing into the chat. Which one feels, and we're going to talk a little bit about like what those statements might mean. Which one feels more like where you're at? Amanda's in both. We have a few votes for to me. Yeah, and with the onslaught of change that we are experiencing right now, it's perfectly understandable. Yeah, are you in to me or through me right now in your mindset? And just to be clear, there are absolutely changes that happen to us, right? We get older, we get sick, we get laid off. There are things that happen to us without a doubt. But we always have a choice about the mindset we bring to these changes. In other words, what is the story that we are telling ourselves about this change right now? So when we are in a to me story, our brain responds in a very particular way. There's a part of our brain called the amygdala. It's a little almond-shaped node at the base of our brainstem. If you kind of go back to the back of your skull and point upward and inward, you'll be pointing at your amygdala. Your amygdala is the part of your brain that is interested in keeping you safe, right? The amygdala is here for your survival. So we love our amygdala, right? It's out here constantly scanning the horizon for threats, right? And when it senses a threat, it will activate our fight or flight response, right? It'll course adrenaline and cortisol, our stress hormone, through our body in an attempt to help us stay safe or, put up our dukes, right? So we love our amygdala. It's here for our survival. Thank you for keeping us alive as a species throughout the millennia. And also, the amygdala has a tendency to perceive a lot of things as threats, right? Especially change. So even if a change is good for us, the disruption to our status quo, which I would argue is not really a thing because nothing ever stops changing, but that's a whole other subject for another webinar. The disruption to our status quo activates our amygdala and boom, we are on high alert. The other thing that the amygdala does when it hijacks, that's the neurological term for it, the amygdala hijack, when it activates our fight or flight response, it actually sucks all of the resources from the rest of the brain. And in brain terms, resources are energy, right? So literally the calories of energy that are fueling the neurons firing in other parts of the brain all rushes to the amygdala to fire up that teeny tiny part of our survival mechanism to be able to keep us safe and alive. So we're going to learn about another part of the brain in a moment. But for now, just know that when the amygdala in to me mode is activated, it is bringing all of those resources away from the frontal lobes, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which becomes very important, as we shall see. So we want to attend to this story, this to me story, right? That's all about protecting ourselves. And we want to see if we can shift into through me whenever possible. So I'm going to offer you 3 steps for doing this. The through me mindset shift. The first one is to notice to me when it's happening. Can you notice that feeling, that felt sense of to me in the body? Not just in the mind, because the mind will rationalize to me all day long. We're about to take a look at kind of narratively how that happens. But in the body will always tell you the truth about what mode you're in. So in the chat, tell me, because I know you know this intuitively, what kind of sensations in the body clue you into the fact that that amygdala has been activated and that the story you might be telling yourself is more to me than through me? How does that feel in the body? Weight in the chest, holding your breath. Me too, Kat. Holding the breath, tension in the face and shoulders. For me, it's my jaw starting to fidget, heart racing, tight stomach. Yes, these are all telltale signs that we are activated in terms of our nervous system response to danger, and that we are probably in a to me mode when it comes to change. So we are recognizing it in the moment. You take this on as a practice. Really start to notice that reactive activation happening, and you will have a greater chance to disrupt it. And one way to disrupt it is to ask yourself the next question that we have here in our mindset shift. What is the to me story that I'm telling myself here? So if we're aware that to me is happening, we can feel it in the body. What's the story that we're telling ourselves? This is called the drama triangle. And it consists of 3 roles that we human beings play when we get caught in that to me story. So the first role is the victim, right? This is often what we think about when we think of responding to change, right? Or receiving change. Change is happening to me. It's happening. I'm powerless. Maybe I can't do anything about it. When we tend to be in victim mode, we tend to maybe from a behavior standpoint, start to get caught in a complaining loop and feeling like there's nothing that we can do. There's no action that we can take. So victim is one. Then every good story has a villain, and sometimes the villain is us. Our inner villain is the one who is blaming all the other people for the change that is happening, or perhaps blaming them for not changing fast enough. Our villain is very versatile, folks. Okay. So this is the part of us that is highly critical, blaming, really focused on controlling or dominating the situation. And we all have this part inside of us. We don't like to think about ourselves as villains, but please keep an eye out for her or him. I feel like so far, maybe we're all women on this call. So we're going to go with her. Keep an eye out for her. Okay. She's got very sharp stilettos and she will take them to somebody's face. Okay. Moving along. We then have the third point in our drama triangle. And this is the part that surprises folks. The hero of the story. When we're in hero mode, we kind of confuse that with through me, don't we? We kind of think about like, oh, like I'm here to save the day. I'm going to make all of this happen. But the problem with hero mode is that it's overly responsible. That's us trying to do it all ourselves, not sustainable, right? And the effect that it has on other people around us is quite profound and very limiting. So thoughts in the chat. Why is the hero actually not the mindset or the story we want to be coming from in a change scenario? What is the impact that hero tendencies have on the people around us? We know that our victim tendencies can tend to suck the air out of a room, and villain tendencies tend to dominate other people. What's wrong with the hero? Oh, yeah. Okay. Attempting to exert control beyond our scope, depriving others of growing through change. Absolutely, Cecilia. Carlin, it's non-collaborative. Absolutely. When we're in hero mode, we're like, I'm here to save the day. Don't need anybody. It's fine. It's like the Batman ethos, right? Of like, I don't need nobody. Every strength has a shadow side, and we need to be aware of when it's overused. Hero doesn't empower others. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Y'all get it. Here we are. So this is part of To Me as well. Finally, to make this mindset shift, we want to ask, what is possible through me? So we've identified our To Me story. What is possible through me? In other words, how might my involvement in this situation alter the course of what's unfolding in some positive way? Right? How might my involvement make things better? Not solve everything full stop, right? But how can I be a part of the solution? And this is the through part. How do I need to show up, right? With what mindset, with what energy, with what strategies do I need to show up in order to bring about the kinds of change that I want to see? Yeah, Amanda nails it in the chat, living by example, right? So this is a question. What is possible through me? This is a question that every single successful change leader at any scale has had to ask themselves at some point in time. Because we never begin with perfect conditions. We always begin with things being unsatisfactory in change, right? That's why we have to change things. And yeah, change is inevitable, but there is no guarantees that the change that we want to see is what we're going to get unless we step up out of our small To Me story and into a through me mindset. And in a through me mindset, that villain becomes a challenger. That victim becomes a creator. The hero can be a coach for others, kind of going back to what Cecilia was saying about helping others grow through change, right? So if this is all sounding a little too theoretical, because you know I love a framework, let's ground this conversation in a case study. I want to bring you a real leader who inspires me around transformational leadership. Transformational leadership, Satya Nadella is probably one of our best current case studies for this approach to leading through change. Satya Nadella started at Microsoft in 1992 as an engineer. 3 days, wouldn't that be amazing? 3 decades later, a little bit more time. 3 decades later, he is chairman and CEO. And as we will see, he has transformed his company in very profound ways. But you do not have to be a CEO to be a transformational leader. You don't even have to be an executive. You don't even have to manage people. You don't even have to have a job right now. Okay? Anyone, anywhere, in any system can lead change. I define transformational leadership as somebody who puts forth a purposeful vision for how things can be better, and then who works to create the conditions for a team or a group of people to realize that vision. Very simple definition of leadership. So, what's a purposeful vision? Well, friends, that brings us to truth number 2. Change is possible. Now that we've accepted that change is inevitable, we've accepted the invitation, right, to transformational leadership. We actually have to get clear about what kind of change we want to see, right? And this is where your purposeful vision comes in. We do not start out by pointing out all the problems that we're going to solve. That is not motivating for people. We don't start by telling people to stay positive. It's all going to work out great. I once was working with I met with a CEO following the acquisition of her company by another company. And she said, I've just been telling everybody that everything is going to be fine. And I was like, cool. How's that going for your team? Right? Her team were like, it is not going to be okay. Existential crisis from the organization, feeling very unmoored in terms of their future with the business. So many questions. And here we've got sunshine and rainbows from the CEO, right? So we don't want to focus on the problems. We also don't want to default to toxic positivity, right? Thirdly, we don't want to obsess over crafting the perfect plan. More on that to come in the next truth. We are simply going to start by asking ourselves, what's possible? What's possible here? Where are we going and why? These are the questions at the heart of our purposeful vision. So what ideas do you have for how things can be better, wherever you happen to be right now, right? And if you're open to sharing, I won't read them aloud if you don't want me to, just put anon in your comment. But if you're open to sharing a particular vision or idea you have for change that you're working through, we'd love to bring some more real life examples into the chat. When my last corporate job, I had the role of chief culture officer, and I was there to help an organization come together following a merger and create a new sense of place, a new sense of culture in that organization. And my vision was that we would create a culture where everyone was continually learning, all the way up to from the CEO, all the way down to the new interns, that we would be a learning organization. Now, my vision for my business and the work that I do in the world is that we will have a leader of radiant change in every organization. That's my vision. That is what I see out there to be pursued, right? That's why I get out of bed every morning. Kat, thank you for sharing. Kat's working to create a culture of curiosity, connection, and kindness. That is her vision for where she's going and why. So this is really about an idea, all right? It's about, can you allow yourself to imagine, to see a different reality to the reality that you're living in today? And this is actually very important. Vision is not a metric. I meet lots of CEOs who are like, our vision is double-digit growth. That's not a vision. It might be a goal, kind of. It's really more of a metric, right? It's an outcome. Your vision is the future reality that will make all of your desired outcomes inevitable. I'm going to say that again. Your vision is the future reality that makes all those metrics, all those desired outcomes and outputs inevitable. So building toward that vision, that new reality, that is our work as transformational leaders. You have to be able to see it, and then you have to be able to express that vision to other people. Why is this so important to start with vision? I'm going to be honest with you. This is probably the notion around change that I get the most pushback from the C-suite, right? Because they want to stay focused on nuts and bolts. They want to stay focused on the, to-do list, and this is how we're gonna. Vision is so important because it keeps our and our team's prefrontal cortex engaged. So the prefrontal cortex is the newest part of our brain in evolutionary terms. It's the part of our brain that is focused on the future, that does our strategic thinking, that is able to orient toward goals. And it is the part of our brain that is most at odds with the amygdala that we talked about earlier. So we need to double down on our PFC, prefrontal cortex, sometimes called the CEO of the brain, because it's where our executive function lives. It's the part of our brain that decides where we're focusing on, right? We want to keep our prefrontal cortex as engaged as possible as we are moving through change. This is very important to our ability to be able to ourselves stay centered, grounded, and focused on the future, as well as that of our team. And our vision does this for us. Our vision does this for us. When we can reconnect with where we're going and why, what this is all for, boom, we've re-engaged and reactivated our prefrontal cortex. So our vision guides us. It's like our North Star guiding us. It grounds us when, not if, things get hard, tough. And it galvanizes other people to join us. There's an energy around what Kat shared in the chat, our culture of curiosity, connection, and kindness. Who doesn't want to be a part of that? Who's not leaning in toward that, right? So our vision brings people in. How do we get to a purposeful vision? I want to share with you one of my favorite frameworks. It comes from the School of Appreciative Inquiry and Organizational Development kind of ethos. It's called SOAR. And it's a more visionary version of the SWOT analysis that you're probably familiar with: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. SOAR is really about creating a sense of that new reality that we're working toward. And it starts with strengths, just like SWOT does. What are those current strengths that exist today that we're building on? And that then brings in opportunities, but not opportunities to improve. This is really about opportunities that we can leverage, right? So how might we take this current crisis that our clients are facing and leverage that as an opportunity for what we're going to be bringing forward to the marketplace, right? What opportunities in terms of what our people need differently now than they needed before can we leverage in terms of making ourselves a standout employer? Right? So what opportunities will we leverage? What aspirations? This is where we really get to get visionary. What aspirations do we have? What is the impact that we ultimately want to have writ large? And we can ask ourselves this questions in terms of our career. We can ask ourselves this question in terms of our organizations. And then where the rubber meets the road are our results. What are the results that are going to demonstrate that impact? What are the leading indicators that will tell us that we're on our way, right? What will we be able to point to see, to measure, to report, right? That tell us that all of this is moving in the direction of that purposeful vision. Let's see what Mr. Nadella has to say about vision. So over here on the left, you have the two vision statements that preceded him. So the first one came from the earliest days of Microsoft from Bill Gates, who said, a computer on every desk, right? It was all about scale. I want everybody in the world to have a computer, every desk in the world to have a computer, right? So that was about going big, go big or go home. Satya Nadella's predecessor, Steve Ballmer, came in with more of a strategic product focus. He said, okay, we're going to be all about devices and services. It doesn't really belong on this slide because it's not a vision, but it was the best he had, right? Steve Ballmer is kind of a perfect example of a transactional leader. And devices and services is kind of a perfect example of why, right? Then in 2014, Nadella comes in and says, this is our vision, folks. We will reinvent productivity to empower every person and every organization on the planet to do more and achieve more. And that, my friends, is a purposeful vision. The why is crystal clear. The why we're here, the why come to work every morning, crystal clear. And that's really what a good vision offers us, is clarity. Because when it comes to change, certainty is not a thing. You're not going to have certainty. Sorry. But the clarity of our vision, which we can then use as a strategic guide, we can use as a decision-making filter, we can use as a motivational rally cry. The clarity of that vision is enough to help us move forward into the confusion of the next truth. Change is complex. This is number 3. Truth number 3, the final truth under the header of we can change, is that change is complex. And this is the truth that really reveals why it's not just a straight shot from vision to results, right? Because you can see this is where the change curve starts to dip. The question I want to ask you around the change in your world right now is to distinguish, is it complicated or is it complex? What's the difference, right? A computer, a machine, a car engine, a puzzle. Anybody out there like to do puzzles? I like to do puzzles. You know why I like to do puzzles? Because you can solve them, right? They are merely complicated. They have many different parts, but those parts fit together in some kind of logical way that can be solved and resolved. But your organizations, your teams, your marriages, your everything, our society, our global climate, all of these are not complicated systems, they're complex systems. So I want you to think about, instead of thinking about your organization as a computer that you're programming to do what you want and to spit out the results you want, think about it more like a coral reef, right? That you're cultivating. It's a richly complex ecosystem. That's how I think about culture, as an ecosystem. Every part of the ecosystem is contributing to the health of that ecosystem. And leaders set the temperature of the water. by the way. That's the role of leaders, to really create those conditions for change. So we can change things, but we have to be clear that what we're changing is a complex system, where it's not just about the individual parts, it's actually about the relationship between all of them. In a complex system, that is actually where everything happens, not by me or by Carlin or by Kat, but in the space between us and in the interactions of all of us, right? So that's a complex system. How on earth do we work with a complex system? How on earth do we change a complex system? It requires a skill or a skill set that we call systems thinking. This is a whole new way of thinking about change. We go into depth in this in the ARC Change Leadership Lab, but I'm going to give you a little preview and a lovely tool that you can use in your own life and also in your organizations. By all means, bring this back to your teams. They will thank you for it. It is called the Systems Thinking Iceberg or Pyramid. So as with any good iceberg model, and there are a bajillion out there, we're looking at what's visible above the waterline, and then we're looking at what's invisible below. And what's visible is what we found in that fourth SOAR column, right? Results. We can see results very vividly. And oftentimes when I'm approached to work with a team around some kind of transformational change, they're very clear about the results they're getting today that they don't want and the results that they aspire to that they do want. And they would like to move as swiftly as possible from point A to point B. And as we've already seen, that is not how it works, right? What do we have to do instead to change a system? We have to recognize that results are just the tip of the iceberg, proverbially. So results are always emerging from our complex ecosystem, right? A key team player resigns. There's an interdepartmental conflict. A team fails to hit their numbers. These are examples of results of a system. They're sometimes also called events. So for you systems thinkers out there, I'm using these interchangeably. So go ahead and bring to mind a result that you are currently seeing emerge from your ecosystem, right? And if you want to drop that into the chat, we would love to see it. If you've got examples of results, maybe undesirable results, if you're just at the beginning of your change journey, if you're further along, maybe you can share some successes that are resulting from the work that you've been doing in your system. What typically happens in terms of our reaction, in terms of how we meet these results, is we figure out, okay, what's happening? Whose fault is it, if it's an undesirable result or event, and what's the fastest way to fix it? So sometimes we'll pause to, point our finger, the villain, right, and blame somebody for what's happening. But then we're just going to snap right to fixing it. How do we get the new results? Oftentimes it's like, well, if we, if we're not hitting the numbers, we should just increase the numbers, right? That kind of linear thinking, which is not terribly effective, as we see. Oh, Cecilia, thank you for popping an example of a result in here. New HR technology is creating inconsistent employee experiences. Yeah, okay, great. So the employee experience is being adjusted or shifted or dinged, perhaps, from this new emerging technology. So if we stay here at the level of the event, or the result, we're only likely to get to surface level solutions. We are not likely to get to root causes. And that means we're going to spend an awful lot of time fighting the same fires over and over and over again, right? Rather than developing a resilient, adaptive, high-performing ecosystem. Anybody out there, show of hands, feel like a firefighter most days, where you're just continually just like putting out the fire in front of you and not really getting to any meaningful shifts in the system. So in order to get deeper, we've got to adopt some curiosity about the system and look for patterns. Upon recognizing the results we're getting, we can get curious about these results over time. We can ask questions like, has this happened before? What behaviors are producing this result in the system? Under what conditions? With what catalysts, right? So what is the pattern that we can see here over time? Not just this one thing happening today, but is there something going on here? So to use Cecilia's example, are there other instances where new technology has really been disruptive? You know, is it just about this tech and we just kind of have to suck it up and get on with it and wait for things to calm down? Or has this happened before? Is it likely to happen again the next time we have a new technology rolling out, right? Can we get curious about what is going on here? Is there a particular kind of resistance that's emerging as a behavior here, right? How have we introduced this change? And is that maybe something that's going on? So suddenly we have much more information about this result, and we will be able to better anticipate the next instance. So what patterns are you seeing in your system right now? And then we can keep digging because the patterns don't come from anywhere. The patterns come from structures that perpetuate these patterns. So this may be the structure of a team's hierarchy. It might be the structure of, you know, how we do change around here, kind of our maybe a more linear change management, top-down rollout approach, which later on in the 10 truths in We Must Play, we bust those and we offer you some new strategies. It could be the way roles are defined. These are all examples of structures. Incentives are structures, right? What kinds of behaviors are being rewarded? A structure could be communication channels. Maybe information is getting withheld or stuck somewhere, right? So it's important to recognize that some structures are informal and some are more formal, right? So maybe we've officially designed them. Maybe they're just kind of emerging as norms in the system. So just because they aren't written down doesn't mean your structures don't exist. And we have to be really intentional about designing and redesigning them. Oh, Kat, thank you for bringing in this note. She says, I find it tricky to help people take the time to really reflect, to begin to analyze what's happening, to begin to dig down, right, into the system. So much of our US culture is go faster, do more with less, no rest. And that, my dear, takes us to the very base of the pyramid, which is paradigms. You have just named a number of paradigms that are dominant in our culture in the West, in the US, but also in other parts of the West and the world. Go faster, do more with less, no breaks, right? More is better than less, right? Outputs are more important than outcomes. Short term is more valuable than long term. There are so many paradigms that are operating deep down at the base of our ecosystems, so deep that we can't see them. But they are absolutely informing the structures that exist in our organizations, which are perpetuating the patterns, which are producing the results that we are getting, right? So examples of paradigms you might find under the surface. We've named a few of them. A few I've seen in some of the clients I've worked with. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. You know, you're supposed to be able to figure it out on your own. How about this one? Being busy is how you show your value. Whew, that one stings, right? Organizationally, taking on more projects is more profitable than doing quality work, right? So going for volume over quality, which makes sense in terms of the math, in terms of linear thinking. Yeah, that tracks. However, strategically, sustainably, it is not going to get you where you want to go. So what are the paradigms that are powering your ecosystem right now? In the ARC Change Leadership Lab, we get to the root of what are the paradigms at the heart of the change that you want to see, and what is the shift that needs to happen from to in order to get you there. Okay. Very quickly, we don't have time for this. I know we don't have time for this, but I don't want to skip over it because I want you to see how this is actually workable. This is how we take systems thinking and start to let it inform our strategy, right? Because that's what we're doing here. This is a whole new way to think about strategy, not the linear plan, but a strategy of leverage points. Well, once we understand something of what's going on in our system, we have a whole menu of possibilities for where we're going to try to exert some leverage and move change through the system. The leverage points range all the way from the highest possible impact, but it does take some investment of time, effort, etc. Shift that paradigm. It takes effort. As Kat said, it's tricky, right? It's like we're up against it. It's not easy to do that. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes a lot of clarity, but it is what absolutely is going to have the most powerful impact on your ability to shift your system. But you have other options too. You can reframe or change a goal, not just adjusting a number, but setting a different kind of goal. Notice where adjust numbers is on this on this grid, right? Low impact, it's low investment. It's easy. It's easy to say, oh, we're just going to move the target up here. Now go get it, right? But it doesn't really work. But changing a goal, okay, we used to track speed to hire, right? For all you HR and recruiting people out there, we used to track how fast we could get a body in the door. But maybe now we change that goal to success is now how long our new hires stay with us, or how many new hires are still with us 1 to 2 years later, right? Or maybe how quickly a new hire is able to onboard and mentor other team members because they're so firmly entrenched in the organization. These are different goals that point to a different kind of paradigm at work in the system. Okay, we don't have time to go into all of these, but again, this will be recorded in a video. You can come back and revisit the leverage points in the systems thinking, or join us for ARC this September, and you'll go deep into mapping out a strategy that includes all of the leverage points that make sense for you. Oh, here's our friend Satya Nadella again. So the case study of Satya's systematic culture shift at Microsoft, right? In terms of paradigms, let's start at the bottom. In terms of paradigms, he came in, I mean, he didn't come in, he had been there for a long time. So he was well-versed in the paradigm of the fixed mindset. He said, we have been a culture of know-it-alls. We need to be a culture of learn-it-alls, right? Shifting into a growth mindset. So that structurally meant moving from stack ranking and focus on people kind of proving themselves to focus on improving, investments in employee development. It also meant structurally a shift from bureaucracy and basically praising people for fitting into the established norms of the structures of Microsoft to servant leadership, giving people freedom, and leaders really being about serving their teams and rewarding people not for following the rules, but for taking risks, right? So you can start to see how the structures are emerging out of a very different mindset down there. The patterns that resulted in the old place, it was complacency, competition, and infighting, right? Folks were at each other's throats, kind of in a nice way sometimes, but sometimes in kind of a sweaty, yelly way, right? And where they ended up with is, as they moved into the 10 years of Satya Nadella's CEO tenure, pitching new ideas, collaborating across teams, not only across teams, but also across external partners, which never would have happened in the old days, and building partnerships, even in retail locations with other brands, with other potentially competitive brands, because they saw that if we are all able to lift the innovation in our field and make the customer experience more seamlessly navigable, everybody wins. And that has shifted Microsoft in the past decade from a highly defensive position where they were trying to fight off newcomers and a real lack of innovation. I mean, they missed out on cloud completely and mobile under Ballmer's tenure. Now they're a market leader in both of those areas. And their market cap has grown from $330 billion, which was already pretty great, to $3 trillion as of last year, right? All guided by Nadella's purposeful vision, but it still guides them today. All right, we have covered the first 3 of the 10 truths of radiant change. Next up is really where things get interesting. It's the trough of disillusionment, which always sounds to me like something right out of The Princess Bride. That is really where we run into the what's hard about change. And what's hard about change is that we are human and we resist change. what's also doable about change is that we are human, right? So that's where we pick up and start to climb back up out of that trough into the next 7 truths of radiant change. And the rest of we must play as well. We cover all of this in depth, not merely theoretically, but also through case studies, and even more importantly, through the lens of a real change that you are trying to bring forward in your work or in your world. In 12 weeks, we take, and you have to come into ARC with a sense of a particular change that you're leading, because we've got to make this real for ourselves, right? And in a small cohort of maximum 10, we cut off the cohort at 10 people. You get together every other week for 90 minutes with me and your cohort. You have video and audio modules to kind of get the basics of each of the truths and each of the tools. And then that means that our time together is really about practice and sharing and going deep. You get a one-on-one coaching session with me, really going deep into your change leadership. And you get the ARC playbook, which is kind of the first iteration of the book that I'm writing. It is 100 pages of paradigm shifting practices and tools that you can take back to your team right away. So you can see here some of the lovely things that our ARC alumni have said about their experiences in ARC. I think the first one is probably my favorite. That sense of feeling more resilient, feeling one's own fatigue drop off, and feeling renewed in our ability to really lead change wherever we go. So you can learn more and register for ARC at kristenlasanti.com/ARC. You can drop me a note. Let me know if you're interested. We do kick off September 11th. We would love for you to be a part of this journey. It's a lot of fun. We have a really good time. As we close out today, we have 5 minutes for questions, and I would love your questions. You can come off mute, you can drop them in the chat, whatever you'd like to do. I would also love your feedback. So if you would be so kind, take a quick screenshot, quick QR code scanning thing of what you see here. If you take 1 minute to offer me feedback on this webinar, you will then be delivered to a page on my website that has a download for the 10 Truths of Radiant Change worksheet for you. So if you want to know what are the rest of the truths, what are some questions I can continually be asking myself and my team to ensure that we are moving through this change curve in a constructive, creative way, then that worksheet is there for you. So I will leave this up on the screen while we see if anybody has questions or comments and insights. I mean, I'd love to know what's really resonating with you from what we've covered today. By all means, drop into the chat or just come off mute and let's hear your voice. Otherwise, we can enjoy a nice moment of silence. Some of you know I'm very comfortable with silence. Cecilia, I see you. Hello.
Hi, Kristen. This was so wonderful. Thank you so much for organizing this and sharing this morning. I'm somebody who is developing a plan to transition out of corporate and still, playing a role in some of the change management in my current corporate environment and human resources. So there was so much. What I took away today is how much mindset work is really needed, like for our leaders specifically, before we even start to roll out this change. And my experience in 10 plus years in the corporate sector, well, actually longer than that, but my experience is that that's such a missing part. Kind of like you said, there's like this big beautiful plan that's developed and rolled out, and then the leaders are expected to help educate and sustain this change. And it's like, oh, but where are their minds, where are their hearts? So I just really, really appreciated the framework and the language used. Oh, it was so refreshing to not just get a bunch of corporatees when talking about change management. So just all the love and appreciation for you this morning.
Oh, Cecilia, thank you so much for that. I so appreciate it. Yeah, we really want to ground this work in the most human of terms, right? And have a conversation around change, because it really is about our relationship to change changing. The other thing that I'll just point you to that might be of interest to you and your leaders is the let's see, I think it's the fifth truth here is about leadership specifically. So once we've kind of reckoned with, okay, we've got our mindset right, we've got our vision, we know we're dealing with a system and not just a linear plan, we understand how to work with other people's resistance. We also really focus in on the intentionality of change leadership, right? So getting out of our own autopilot in terms of all of the ways that used to work for us as leaders to get things done, some of those controlling tendencies we talked about with the villain mindset, for example, but also people pleasing tendencies, right? Some of that stuff has really worked for us in the past and now is blocking us from being truly transformational leaders. So that kind of midpoint of our reckoning with we are human becomes very profound from a leadership perspective. Food for thought. We've got one last minute. Any last thoughts or questions from folks? Otherwise, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your practice. Please stay in touch. Drop me a line on LinkedIn. Let me know how this went for you. And yeah, onward together. Take good care.
Thank you, Kristen. I loved this. I just want to say, like I've been trying to figure out how to talk about putting people back at the center of business, and this is all the justification for why that matters. Like the paradigm is the reason that things don't change. And I know there's probably not time for it now, but just talking about what um, I was curious, like what maybe was one of the biggest transformations you've seen in leaders that have been participating in this work with you, because I know that that to me seems like how does how do you narrow in on that particular, I guess, switch that needs to happen? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm happy to talk a bit about it. This is why a core element in the work that I do when I'm working with teams through a transformational change is leadership development. And
Yeah.
we'll do some executive coaching, we'll do some leadership assessments to really help them understand. And I don't mean the kind of like DISC assessments as like you're,
Sure.
or MBTI, like you're an ENFP or a blue
Yeah.
and a little bit of red. Really a clear understanding of how their team is receiving their leadership in this moment.
The more like 360s.
Yeah, I use a beautiful tool called the leadership circle for this.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you know it,
Yeah.
I find that to be such an opener for leaders to understand, oh, this is exactly as we were talking about a moment ago around change is intentional. This is that my pattern. This
Yeah.
is the pattern that I've been stuck in. I keep doing this over and over again
Yeah.
because it used to make me successful or it used to keep me safe, probably both,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if we can see that and create a little bit of space, a little bit of present moment awareness of ourselves to make a different choice in the moment, then we can change. And I have seen leaders step out of highly controlling patterns and into being a very effective coach for their teams. I've seen
Yeah.
leaders shift out of being,
It's
very,
beautiful.
very people pleasy, very appeasy, and shift
Yeah.
into really being visionaries in their own right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a ton of time. It does take some intention, and it
Yeah.
does take some structure and some support.
Well, that's really helpful to hear and inspiring that you were able to see these transformations. And I am definitely going to post about it on LinkedIn, because yeah, I just loved it. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. I'm so glad you're here, Amanda. Great to
Yeah,
see you, and we'll stay
you
in
too.
touch.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.